All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of our history podcast. My name is Tyler, and this is Jeff.
Hey, what's good?
All right, along with us is Carissa, who will be in the background monitoring our audio and making sure we don't get too off topic. We will be the hosts of the podcast, and we will be covering the fall and rise and everything in between of Rome. So, Jeff, what's your general understanding of this topic?
Well, I know Rome started in 753 BC. It started off
Hmm.
as a kingdom, a small city with a small population, but eventually it expanded to dominate the Mediterranean Ocean Sea
All
there.
right. So you know a lot.
Of
That's
course, I
awesome.
know a lot. I am the foremost philosopher of Rome, Tyler.
Okay, well that's good to hear. Well let's get going. Okay, so as part of today's lessons plan, we will be covering a number of specific topics within the larger subject of Rome. Okay, Jeff, if you're okay with that, I'd like to start things off with some background info. And to begin that, we will be going over the Punic Wars. Do you know what that is?
The Punic Wars. Well, those were a series of two wars somewhere around the third century, or sorry, 200 before Christ, and they involved
Oh
Carthage.
my, you really do know your stuff.
Of course,
All
I
right,
know stuff.
well let me pick it up from here. All right. So we're going to talk about the city state which Rome had been before the Punic Wars. So Rome began as a really small city state in central Italy until it decided to expand slowly. And this took a really long period of time, like hundreds of years, to expand to dominate the Italian peninsula. Um, yeah, and that's just something really important to understand before we get into this. Now, the main enemy that they will be facing in this upcoming battle, that is known as the Punic Wars, will be Carthage. Um, so, to know about Carthage, it is a trading empire in North Africa who had come to dominate the Mediterranean before Rome. So, pretty much what you're about to see is the fall of a great empire and the rise of a new one. Just a little of information before then. And this story is really going to be quite something. There is going to be a lot of connections between the two wars. There's technically a third war, but we're going to ignore that. Um, yeah, such as there will be a bunch of familial lines that will pass down, and we will see characters from them continue to lead throughout history. Um, there will be blood ties. There will be so much interesting stuff that you will see as we continue forward. Um, so the first war um, was generally just kind of won by Rome after suffering a number of defeats. But eventually they surpass them. We're just going to go quickly over the first one. What you need to remember is that the leader of the Carthaginian side was a man named Hamilcar Barca, who was the father of a future protagonist. So, as we said, the war was close, but it ended in a Roman victory as they adapted to naval combat, which was the specialty of Carthage. Um, Now, it's undeniable that this war was truly epic in scale, but I would say that it is a warm up to what's about to come. Um, so, as we're about to see, the Second Punic War started due to a border dispute in Spain because of a very unclear contract that relied on a river that even today we don't know which river they were talking about to define the border. All right, so the war started or took place in 218 to 201 BC. So that's, I would say that's what, 2,200 years ago or so. Um, all right, now the Roman plan during this war was to invade Africa and further Spain, whereas the Carthaginians' plan was just generally to hold down and attack, which would be, the sensible thing to do. Um, a man named General Scipio was leading the invasion of Spain. Um, his son is important for later. Don't worry about it. Um, all right, and yeah, with
So
that,
the
yeah.
Carthaginian capital, just to give some further
Hmm.
explanation, the Carthaginian
Yeah.
capital is in modern-day Tunisia, which is why
Hmm.
it's important for the Romans to do an invasion of North Africa. That way
Yes.
they can take the capital.
Yeah, precisely. All right. Um, Jeff, would you like to pick it up with here with Hannibal?
Yeah, sure, but some more context first.
Yes.
The Carthaginian forces were made up of mostly mercenaries, while the Roman
Mm,
forces were made up of motivated Roman, I guess you could call them citizens, but I wouldn't really call them citizens who are doing military service.
I believe at this point they weren't technically, but that's not something to worry about at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
but make no mistake, the Romans did
mhm.
use some mercenaries as well.
Also,
Actually,
might I,
quite a bit.
mhm. Yes, but might I just recommend to anybody listening to the podcast to pull up a topographic map of the Western Mediterranean, because it's kind of important to understand the geography of where we are placed in these two. Of course, you have Rome, and most people know where Rome is. But as Jeff said, with Carthage in northern Africa, it's very useful to kind of see specifically what they were dealing with. And to direct one's focus, I would look at the Alps as well and that whole mountain chain because that will become important very, very soon. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so all right, I'll pick it up from here. The So Hannibal had a sort of enclave in the Iberian Peninsula, which he was expanding, and eventually this led to a conflict with Rome. And Rome's strategy was that they were going to split their forces into two main groups. One from around the Sicily area, which would launch a naval invasion into Tunisia, and some basically they just wanted to go into Africa. Well, they would leave behind a small force to screen the Carthaginians out of northern Italy.
Hmm.
Hannibal knew this, and he decided to take advantage of this by throwing 70,000 troops through the Alps into their thinly defended rear, or I guess you could call it a rear, since
Yes.
Rome really just wanted to
Yeah.
spearhead into Africa. And the problem with this, though, was that Hannibal was going to go through the Alps in the beginning of winter, which was not a especially great idea because that means that they're probably going to lose quite a few troops due to frostbite and just generally poor conditions.
Along with
However,
just
this
cliff
also
sides.
meant
Hmm.
that nobody was really expecting it. So when Hannibal, the mad lad that he is, actually did pull it off, he was down in Italy, and nobody knew the better.
Hmm.
Well,
All right.
actually, that being said, though, Scipio did, I believe, have a brief encounter with him as he was moving from the Iberian Peninsula into
Hmm.
the Alps.
Yes. All
Um,
right.
'Cause yeah, so they blast into Italy. Uh, the Romans are completely outmaneuvered, and they have no idea. Well, they're starting to get an idea of what's going on. And it doesn't look good for them, right? Like Hannibal just showed up with 25,000 troops, the remainder of his army from his march along the Alps, and he is now in Italy, causing massive amounts of panic and destruction. Uh, the Romans keep on losing battles, and eventually they turn to dictatorship, which is a thing that they can do in their political system. The new dictatorship is now controlled by a person named Fabius. His idea is to kind of so basically what's happening is Hannibal is like living off the land. He's just kind of going around behind enemy lines, like just raiding villages, just causing panic. But he doesn't have actually enough troops or equipment to lay siege to Rome, which is kind of like their ultimate goal. So he's just kind of messing around in Italy, but like nobody can touch him, right? So Fabius's idea is that he's just gonna screen Hannibal so that he can't do anything. Like he moves into a small town, and then they're gonna like stop him, but they're not gonna meet him for a decisive engagement. Uh,
Mhm.
this, however, is very unpopular with the Roman public because they believe that they can win like a decisive engagement and just kick him out of Italy. However, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Uh, Fabius's ideas are actually working though. Hannibal realizes that his troops are like he's not going to have food for much longer, right? However, a general who is angry at Fabius's plans also takes up the mantle of co-dictator. His name is Minicus, and immediately he raises, I think, what was the largest army that the
Mhm.
Romans had ever pulled together,
Yeah.
made up of about roughly 80,000 legionnaires. And his idea is that he's just going to march straight at the at Hannibal's army and just win with sheer numbers.
Brilliant tactics.
Yeah. So, anyways, what ends up happening though is he marches his giant block of 80,000 troops at Hannibal. Uh, Hannibal's line is organized into a like crescent shape, right? So imagine like an eyelid. Or, well, I guess it's not a super. Okay, so a crescent moon, right? And against the Roman army's block, it's a reverse crescent moon, so it's kind of like a half sphere moving towards the Roman block. What ends up happening is that the sphere wraps around the Romans so that they kind of get like semi-encircled, and then the Carthaginians also have a huge domination in the mobile cavalry game with their Numidian horsemen. The Numidians defeat the Roman cavalry, which are kind of having their own skirmish off to the side, and then they swing around to the back of the Roman block, which means that Hannibal's smaller force has actually encircled the larger Roman force, which is very impressive. And then they just squeeze down, and yeah, the only was like 10,000 of the original-ish legionnaires of the original 80,000 live.
Yeah. So about 75,000 casualties, if I remember correctly, which is incredibly high.
So yeah, crushing defeat for the Romans. People start to accept Fabius's ideas more after this.
Mhm. All right. Well, I can pick it up with here. So at the end of the Battle of Cannae, the war comes close to a conclusion. However, what you may be thinking might not be what you expect. Like it might take a turn, if you know what I mean. Um, so with the large casualties of Cannae, Rome still will not surrender. They're kind of pulling a they didn't hear the bell. They're not going down. Um, and what they're doing now is actually they're making moves in Spain, which we talked about at the very beginning, if you remember Jeff's discussion on that. So this man named Scipio Africanus is mopping up the Carthaginians in Spain. He's
Um,
doing unbelievably well. Hmm.
he's not actually named Africanus yet. He's
Oh,
just
well, yes.
Scipio. He gets the
Either.
title though after the war,
Yes.
but
You are right,
his
Jeff.
father's name is Scipio, so I guess we'll just call him Scipio Africanus still. to make
Yeah,
it less
for
confusing.
simplicity, we will just call him Scipio Africanus. Oh my, reminds me of names we're going to be dealing with later. Um, no matter. Yes, so pretty much they're mopping up the Carthaginians in Spain, which is actually causing a really big problem for the Carthaginians at home. They're getting really worried about an actual invasion. And with that, the politicians in Carthage force Hannibal to return to Africa, even though he was so incredibly close to ending Rome, which must have felt horrible to him. And with that, we begin the final battle, really, in which the two titans of Hannibal and Scipio, which, if you want to learn more about Roman history, I would highly recommend looking into them. They're very interesting characters. They end up facing off on the battlefield. However, if you remember, Jeffrey talked about the Carthaginian cavalry and how it was superior, but the Romans had actually placed themselves well and had actually gotten that cavalry on their side, which in this final battle really turned it for the Romans, and they won the Second Punic War. And with the defeat of Carthage, none really stood in the way of Rome for the next long period of time. Um,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, some important information is that both sides actually used quite a bit of mercenaries again.
Hmm.
The Romans used uh, the Gothic tribes, and so did uh, Carthage, actually.
Hmm. We'll be covering more on the Gothic tribes later. Don't you guys worry. Uh,
Also, the way that Hannibal was forced to retreat from Rome is kind of ironic because it's very similar to what his father did in the first uh, Punic War.
hmm
Uh, Again, both father and son were actually like winning on Roman territory, but then due to the failure of the Carthaginian leadership, they were failing at home, so they were forced to withdraw.
hmm Yeah. Um, yeah. Jeff, I'd like to ask you something, if that's all right.
All right, what do you want to ask?
Well, I was wondering what you think the impacts of this war were on modern day.
Well, that's an interesting question, Tyler. You see,
Thank you.
it actually has much more impact than you might think. One of them being is that, we know that Rome survived, and this means that, we have republics, and yeah,
Mhm.
basically, uh, the like one impact might be that the American Senate is called the American Senate instead of like some Spanish alternative.
Yeah, yeah. Also, like Latin being so prevalent, like you can find it on money in certain countries, in bills, on
Yeah,
all sorts of
basically,
writings.
the
Mhm.
Roman values survived while Carthaginian ones didn't.
Yeah, no, like the culture of Carthage itself has disappeared over time. Uh,
Yeah, eventually, what I think it was Scipio Africanus's son went back like 7 years later and
mhm.
wiped out their capital.
Yes, and that actually created a whole other phrase known as, I believe it was a Carthaginian defeat or something, or sowing salt in the ground. You know what? That's off topic.
Who
Um,
even cares?
yes, would recommend for other people to look into that later if you are interested, though. It just proves even more how much these historical things have kind of influenced our societies today. But I believe it's about time to move on to some good old Roman expansion, wouldn't you say, Jeff?
Ah, yes, don't worry. I've got this somewhat in the bag. All
Good.
right, so uh, Roman society, expansionism is basically built like ingrained into them. Like their
Mhm.
expansion or their creation myths were, like even those were kind of based around expansionism. Like they wouldn't exist without that. Uh,
Mhm.
However, well, yeah, actually, it's building into it. Roman politicians basically needed expansionism also in order to exist because without the popularity from the citizens, they wouldn't like stay in office. So it was basically like a self-perpetuating cycle of violence and expansionism.
Hmm.
Um, Also, the Romans did have very good uh, like technology for the time period. They were pretty urbanized. This led to them seeing pretty much all others, however, as barbarians.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of talk about like pretty much colonizing like barbarians and like absorbing them into their territory.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, this trend continued throughout the existence of the Roman Empire. Um, yeah, their military structure uh, used legions, and yeah, basically they Roman citizens had to take part in military service. So they'd be called up to serve for the empire, and they used these legions to conquer vast swaths of territory.
Hmm.
Uh, their armies were very well disciplined, and yeah, so basically they had a lot of battlefield tactics going on. Like I believe it was three lines of main troops that they would use whenever they went into battle. You get like the new recruits who'd kind of be like skirmishers. And then you get like the main bulk of your force who are kind of like the average Joe soldiers. And then the rear line would be made up of like veterans. The idea was is that you'd this is ancient warfare by the way, like you'd send up your skirmishers would have a battle. Uh, then they would fall back behind the second line. The second line would juke it out as like medium infantry, and then the second line would fall back, and your like rear line would just kind of finish it. Uh, yeah.
Hmm. And something to
Um,
note, like, oh, yes, you continue, Jeff.
yeah. So they're also like to be organized into bricks so that they could maneuver them around like through each other and stuff.
Hmm. All right. Um, yeah, but what I was going to get to is that it's important to note that these tactics still influence today. Like as we discussed, Fabian, the Roman dictator, his tactics are called Fabian tactics, and they're still discussed in military colleges to this day. So even though these are like thousands and thousands of years old, they're still important to remember and just talk about, and are used. All right, enough of that. As Jeff was saying, though, Rome was built for war. So let's talk about what they actually conquered. Um, it began with the slow conquest of the Italian peninsula, which was broken up at the time. It's very important to remember, though, that this took an incredibly long period of time, around 500 years. And that's even before the Punic Wars. But then again, Punic Wars came and they went, and that really just led Rome to have an unparalleled power in the Mediterranean, especially in the western side. If I'm not wrong, I believe there were still some notable presences, even Alexander the Great at a point in the east, but the western Mediterranean was undoubtedly dominated by Rome after the Second Punic War. Um, Also, with the Second Punic War, they gained control of Spain and North Africa, which really just gave them even more prominence. Um, and along with that confidence, they were very confident about their ability to expand and conquer new places. So they invaded a place called Macedonia, which at the time consisted of most of modern day Greece. And I would implore you to look into it further. Macedonia has a very interesting and twisting here. history, which I find quite interesting. Um, so Greece at the time was splintered even further than Macedonia, and they had an incredibly hard time fighting back, but they still did surprisingly well even for that. However, the Romans won a major battle in 146 BC, also known as the Battle of Corinth, cementing their victory and leading to the later integration of Greece. And something to note about that integration is the fact that I'm sure many of you know about how the Roman gods and the Greek gods are incredibly similar. And this integration that I was just
Uh,
talking about is part of that. Um, yeah, like the Romans took the cultures of places that they took over and they integrated them into themselves, which is really important for the way that they operated, as they would add parts of different places to themselves to make them stronger, more powerful, and more ready for further conquest. All right, Jeff. I know that was pretty quick when it comes to expansion, but do you have any thoughts on what we just went over?
Well, I think it's important to note that their assimilation is quite interesting because when the even in the beginning when they assimilated other cultures and stuff into themselves, they would take parts of like their for example, pantheon or culture and absorb it into,
Hmm.
and this would make uh like coming together much easier for
Yeah.
both parties. Um,
Mm.
it's not really like how you would think of like other cultures getting along nowadays, for an example, like America, or well, I guess not really America, like Canada or something, where we celebrate our differences. In Rome, it was like,
Hmm.
yeah, you're here. Look, we celebrate the god of crops. That god of crops is actually our god of crops. You're Roman now. Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, if I remember correctly, Jesus was once a Roman god, or at least he was tied to a Roman sun god, which is, well, quite odd to think about in the modern day.
Yeah, Jesus was in the pantheon for a little
Je-
while.
Jesus, the Roman sun god, as you do. Um, yeah. Also, that has to do with technology. Like they integrated technology very well. Um, they learned how to build ships from the Carthaginians during the First Punic War, and that really just helped them expand even more. And that's probably the best example I can think of. But yeah, they were just really good at integrating everything that they came upon, which helped them expand a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, when they, I think it was during the first Punic War, they didn't really have a navy.
Hmm.
So when they found a Carthaginian ship that kind of like reverse engineered it, they say that they didn't really know how to build ships before that, but that might just be a myth.
Hmm.
I think it's more that their ships probably sucked before that, but they saw a
Yeah.
Carthaginian ship, they just kind of like stole the idea of it and built a bunch more of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would probably agree with you. It's a decent chance they at least knew how to build a boat.
Yeah.
Um. uh. No fishermen for Rome. Um. All right. I think that pretty much wraps up our quick chat on Roman expansion post Punic War. Really, it's just going out, conquering a lot of stuff. But yeah, here comes a bit of a larger topic than what we've covered. Can you guess what it is, Jeff?
A larger topic. Well, let's see. So we've covered everything, well, a lot of stuff that's happened during the Republic.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna take a wild guess and
Oh
say that
my.
we're gonna be covering the Roman Empire in this next segment.
Oh my goodness, Jeff, you got it. We are
Whoa,
covering the Roman Empire, and in particular, the story of Augustus Caesar. Yeah,
my
you may.
gosh.
It's. I promise it's not that guy Julius. It's a guy named Augustus. It's totally different. Please just follow along. Except his actual name is Octavian, so Yeah, this is what I meant when I said, ooh, I remember the names we're going to have to deal with later. They only get more confusing. Yeah. Okay. So this is the tale of Octavian and his rise to power. And it begins with the death of Caesar, but like that original Caesar, the Julius guy.
Should we talk about Caesar a bit?
Yeah, we should probably talk a little bit about Caesar. Do you want to cover that quickly?
Yeah, sure. Basically, he was just a really popular figurehead in
Hmm.
the Roman just sphere of influence. He did a lot of conquests of the Germanic tribes, and I think towards the end of his life, he declared himself just kind of like permanent dictator,
Yeah,
and then he got stabbed to death by the Senate.
yeah. Um,
Shakespeare even made a play on it a couple centuries later.
yes, very famous. Man got stabbed by his friends. And that's actually where we pick off. So it begins with Caesar's death and the power vacuum left over. Caesar was very much loved by the people, and that ties into the people loving conquest. And he was hated by the Senate for his dictatorial aims. So at the time, Octavian, our protagonist, was the nephew to Caesar, and he was about 19 years old, and he was a student in what is now Greece. Um, and in Caesar's will, like the original Caesar, Octavian received the name Julius East Caesar. So, yeah, names are even more confusing now. Um, all right, now the power vacuum left over left two people with a lot of prominence and ability to kind of take leadership. And that was, of course, Octavian, which I will be calling him because I don't want to call him Julius Caesar because that's very confusing, and Mark Antony, who was a close friend of Caesar who had fought alongside him in the conquest of the Germanic tribes. Um, so originally these two fought against each other, Octavian and Mark Antony. But this changed when Octavian, or the new Julius, marched on Rome and was declared the consul, which is sort of like a president, maybe. Um, so they formed an alliance, and this alliance led to them being declared dictators. And they had their political enemies killed, and they did a lot of dictatorial stuff, you know, stuff like that. They even hunted down the original killers of the original Caesar. Uh, hmm, all right, I'm just going to start calling him OG Caesar and the new one Octavian Caesar. Okay, so they were hunting down the killers of the OG Caesar who were rebelling in the East. Um, And something to note is that Mark Antony did most of the work during this conquest, and that would kind of stir up trouble later, sort of. Um, so with those killers of the OG Caesar defeated, Mark and the new Caesar divided up the empire. Caesar took the west, and Antony took the east. There was a third guy um, who's not really important, who got a little bit of Africa, but he doesn't really matter. What's really important though is that it was an incredibly tense situation. Like civil war could start at any moment because there were two people each vying for the ultimate power of ruling the whole Roman Empire. Um, yeah. Oh, this is
Uh,
also where. Mhm.
well, never mind. Keep it going.
This is also where we introduce Cleopatra. I'm sure many of you have at least heard that name. And I guess let's just say that she became friends with Mark Antony, and she would come to help him later. Yeah.
Alrighty then. I'll cover the next bit. The breakup. Antony and Julius Octavian Caesar. So the empire is divided up. It's not really working together. In fact, they're practically at each other's throats.
God damn
In 32 BC, they went to war. This is known as the last war of the Roman Republic. It was fairly even, however, Julius made quick moves towards Greece. Antony holds up in Greece while Julius His generals cut off their supplies, forcing a battle. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt. They didn't want to be captured and killed, but the next year, Octavian rolled up in Alexandria. Antony committed suicide, and so did Cleopatra. And that is the end of the Civil War.
Okay, well, that was incredibly quick, but also just going to fill you guys in on what Alexandria is. And it's a major Egyptian city that was set up by Alexander the Great. Um, and those are it is one of the major cities of the entire Roman Empire that will soon uh, be to come. But so Alexandria, Constantinople, Rome are probably the major Roman cities, just to remember throughout the entire history of the empire. Um, yeah, so I'm not sure if that name will come up later in this discussion, but it would be something to learn more about. So yeah, that was a lot of death that we just dealt with. Very quickly, well, not necessarily quickly, but Octavian cleaned up the other people on the other side of the Roman Empire. And with that, Civil War was over, and Julius Octavian Caesar, which is what I'm calling him now, used this as an opening to consolidate his power and become even more of a dictator. So this is pretty much when he changed his name from Julius Caesar to Augustus. Now, Augustus means majestic, great, or venerable. It's a very positive thing. And the name would actually be passed down, and in all effect, it means emperor. The name Augustus would be used by other emperors to denote that they are the emperor. Um, yeah, so he's pretty much the de facto emperor of Rome. He has most of the Senate in his pocket, as well as most of the legions in the empire on his payroll, giving him an immense amount of political power, as well as military power. But the Romans are mostly okay with this dictator stuff because they're just kind of glad that the Civil War is over. Jeff, do you enjoy Civil War? I don't.
Yeah, kind of sucks.
Exactly. I'm sure the people were very happy that it was over. Um, so with that, Augustus actually expanded the empire quite a bit. He obtained peace with Persia and built a lot of stuff. Now that peace with Persia, um, if you want to do any reading on the Byzantine Empire, which we'll talk about towards the end, you will notice that the Persians come in a lot. They're very important to latter Roman history. Um, yeah, it's a whole nother bag of stories. Um, so Augustus was never actually named emperor, but his name was used as the Roman title for emperors, and yeah, so that just kind of worked out. And yeah, the Republic didn't go out with a bang; it just kind of went out with a cough and a wheeze. It died. Yeah, it wasn't some dramatic fight, though that civil war was quite something. But really, what ended the Republic was just the consolidation of power that Octavian, or I guess now Augustus, led. Um, his legacy is really just one of legends, and his name is quite well known, and that helped. And he helped preserve the empire. Um,
Yeah. Uh,
yeah. Okay, Jeff.
okay, so that's it for the story of Augustus. Now, Tyler, what did you think? Any connections to the modern day?
Um, I'm not so sure about the modern. Well, actually, yeah, actually, I think there are some similarities in the rise of empires. Um, as in they would slowly develop into empires and not immediately turn into them, like the British Empire, for a fact. Like started as England until the British Isles were consolidated, and then they just slowly started to expand. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff?
Yeah. Um, I
Hmm.
don't know. Can we see any examples of the breakup of democracy leading into empires in the 20th century?
Um, yeah, actually, like I know this is quite I guess standard practice to look at, but Nazi Germany. Um, as their democracy fell apart, they quickly turned to an expansionist nation. Actually, even more so, Italy during that time under Mussolini, they tore apart their own democracy and quickly turned to expansionism. And they even used like Roman rhetoric and just kind of symbols from the Roman Empire to kind of be like, yeah, we were once this great empire, let's do it again. And that really only led to bad stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Um.
should we briefly explain what a council is, though? Like
Yeah.
a
Sure.
Roman president? Yeah. Okay. So if I recall, uh, correctly, there were two councils most
Mhm.
of the time at any one time,
Yeah. At all
and
times.
yeah, basically they would rule on like opposite days, kind of, or at least the military.
Yeah.
So they would each control about uh like normally they would control about half the army each. The idea is that one would keep the other in check, and yeah. So during the Punic Wars, though, when they decided to declare a dictatorship, that was kind of important because it got rid of all like the bureaucracy surrounding having two generals like ruling on opposite days.
Hmm.
Uh, Also, it's important to note that Fabius did in fact step down as dictator after his.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Actually, the dictatorship only was supposed to lap for or stick around for 6 months, and then the dictator was supposed to step down. And this has actually happened a few times in Roman history, where a
Hmm.
dictatorship was announced, but every time the dictator would step down and relinquish the keys to the empire, so to speak.
Yeah. So this is really like, with Augustus, this is the really one of the first few times that we're seeing somebody truly just take power and hold on to it in a dictatorial sense. Every other one before this, well, except maybe Julius, um, relinquished their power and just kind of followed the social guidelines, I guess. Yeah. Um, okay. I guess we should also probably talk about what the Senate is, because I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just some deep lore. If you wanted to run for any like Roman office, you need to have at least 10 years of military experience. This just kind of puts into perspective what kind of society Rome was.
Mm,
So, yeah, basically everyone who is in a Roman position of power is like a military veteran.
yeah. They really like, the military. Um, but onto the Senate though. They were kind of like the elected body, and they really did work like at least similarly to the modern day Senate, somewhat. Like a bunch of elected officials who kind of worked together and voted on things to move the country forward. Um, yeah, and they're one of the few things that will kind of last throughout the entirety of the empire, though their power will rise and decline as we continue.
Mostly declined from here on out.
Yeah, with the empire, the Senate kind of just became a rubber stamp, but like, they're still there in the background and they'll show up later. And, the influence that this had on future societies is incredibly important. Like, it really helped lead to the creation of modern democracies, I guess, in a way.
God bless America.
Yep, God bless America. Um, also, quickly switching topics, we talked about Cleopatra in this and Egypt as well. And if I'm not wrong, we're going to start to see a fair bit more, or at least Egypt will play a bigger part in Roman politics from here on out.
Yeah, Egypt is a Roman province at some point,
Uh,
right?
yeah, I believe with the conquest of Augustus, they have now become one, or like with the death of Cleopatra, they are now a Roman province. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that means that the Roman Empire now has the Nile River and they can actually feed everyone now because
yeah.
yeah, the
We will
Nile
be
Delta
covering that
is.
later, actually.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, yeah, Jeff is right though. But also at this point, I believe they have pretty much fully encircled the entire Mediterranean. So the Roman Empire is gigantic at this point, incredibly large. Um, but quickly going to do a quick transition. They're about to face off against another threat, and they're going to have some trouble. So, ladies and gentlemen, the next part is important, but it's also quite gruesome if memory serves me well. So please be prepared for that. Not sure how much in depth I'll go, but suffice to say, uh, it won't be pretty. So let's begin with the discussion on Rome and its relation with the Germanic people that we had talked about briefly at the very start. Um, So Rome after Augustus, and even during his time, was quite often trying to conquer Germania, which is modern day Germany. And they were doing okay. They were Romanizing certain provinces until another event in the Balkans, I believe it was a rebellion, caused the army in the area to shrink to less than half its original size because they required a massive amounts of troops to face this. Should probably read more on that later. So the leader of this army in Germania at the point is known as General Varus, and uh, yeah, and he's just kind of leading around trying to integrate, and he's trying to be quite friendly to the people in the area. However, the Germanic people in the area do not like him very much. They don't like the Romans controlling their stuff, and this is about when a guy named Arminius, who is the leader of a Germanic tribe, began to prepare a revolt.
Yeah, so Arminus, he was an ally of Rome. He even had Roman citizenship,
Hmm.
and he was also a like a noble hostage, which means that like basically like some nobles would give up their or well or forcibly give their son or daughter or whatever to the other side, and basically that would just give them leverage or secure kind of a temporary like alliance or whatever. But he was quite an influential figure. He acted as a messenger between the like the tribes in Rome. But apparently he had some underlying resentment or whatever, and he used his role into deceiving Varus into thinking there was a rebellion, and he decided to, well, with that information, they laid a trap for Varus.
Hmm. Um, so as Jeff was saying, Arrhenius, pretty much he went out and prepared an ambush, while Varus settled down to set up camp with his 3 legions. And again, as we said, 3 legions, that is still quite a bit. So this will be at least somewhat challenging to the Germanic tribes. So Varus's troops were following a road that led through a marsh surrounded on both sides by large hills. Um, a little foreshadowing. So the first day of battle occurred when the Germanic tribes, surprise, surprise, attacked from the hills. Who would have guessed? Um, and to note, Varus was passing through the middle of those hills, through that marsh, which didn't go too well. Um, as his soldiers finished passing through the marsh, they had taken heavy casualties, and they decided to set up fortifications, which was actually quite standard practice for Roman soldiers. They were very good at building stuff quickly, and especially these makeshift fortifications. They actually carried around all the necessary tools to build a fort at all times. So, yes, it was kind of a defensive strategy to build a fort whenever there was a battle about to commence. Um, so the next day, they continued their march, but they were soon faced with a dense forest. Um, and something to take note of is that a lot of the, um, I guess the best way to put this is, if you notice, Throughout this, we will be describing a lot of the terrain, and that's going to become a running theme. Um, as in, the terrain plays a large role in the battles that will be coming up, as we saw with the first one, with the marsh and the two hills surrounding it, and next with the dense forest. All right, Jeff.
All right, so this day didn't go any better. So the tribes were fighting on local ground, so they knew the environment very well.
Hmm.
This allowed them to use the terrain to their advantage. Example might be imagine you're bringing an army into an unknown land. You pass through a valley. The local forces know about this valley, so they decide that they're going to engage you in the valley with bows and stuff, and then you have to deal with like arrows falling on you from a valley. But
Hmm.
anyways, that's just a general idea. So they were engaged in this forest. They sustained uh, a large amount of casualties. So then they
Hmm.
had to pull out. Um, Again, they built another fort, pretty standard practice. Uh, but on the fourth day of battle, a lot of rain uh, happened. So, they're now fighting in the rain, of obscuring visibility even more.
Muddy too.
Yep. The exhausted Romans left their encampments and continued marching. However, this was a big mistake.
All right. And so with the Romans marching, we're about to see the real death blow. Even though throughout these last few days of battle, there's been a lot of heavy casualties, we're still about to see the real big one. All right. So the land was once again divided between hills, with marshes and flat land kind of in there. Um, this time, Varus stayed on dry land, which was probably the better move. But then some Germans appeared, and Varus once again prepared to build some fortifications. Um, I believe it is possible that the Germans had realized that this is kind of what they do a lot, but this also could be from Arminius understanding Roman tactics from his youth. Um, but in essence, some hidden Germans ambushed the people who were constructing the fort, and during that, um, Varus killed himself, and his entire army was crushed out of complete shock, and I guess just they were ambushed, didn't know what to do, and a lot of people died. However, there were some survivors, but those survivors were mostly beheaded, with some being crucified on trees, and others being burned alive. So in the end, there weren't really survivors. Um, and that was really the end of Roman attempts for conquering Germania, with the loss of like 3 legions with 20,000 dead. It's definitely not as big as Cannae, but it is arguably one of their most atrocious defeats.
Yeah. Should we talk a little bit about Roman, or not just Roman, but like ancient battle tactics? Because
Yeah, yeah,
I feel
sure.
like the viewers wouldn't know too much. Okay, so
Yeah.
the the ancient battles were fought drastically different from how you think modern battles will be fought, because around the 20th century, you have radio technology and stuff. It's really easy to, well, not super easy, but you can coordinate large groups of people with relative ease compared to what these people had to deal with, right? So
Mhm.
back in the ancient world, you'd be maneuvering troops with like messengers or flags or trumpets or whatever, and that makes it extremely difficult to control large amounts of troops. Uh, so this is why the Germanic tribes actually had kind of an advantage over the Romans, because due to the terrain and just like weather in general, it's just extremely difficult to have control over your legions in this kind of battlefield. Meanwhile, the Germanic tribes had a much kind of smaller like task force that they would set upon the Romans.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot more fluid command, less so the rigid command of the Romans. So they were a lot better at kind of moving around on less optimal terrain. I'm assuming
Yeah.
that's kind of what you're. Yeah.
Um,
Yes. That. Mhm.
Also, uh, flanking tactics and things like charging from the rear are extremely important in ancient battles because you've got your lines, right? They're setting at each other. Most of the attention and like stuff like shields and spears, they're trained forward on like the main brick of enemy opponents, right? And this is how the Roman soldiers are trained. They've got to just it's pretty simple actually. Well, there's a lot more complicated stuff into it, but the general idea is just kill the people in front of you, right?
Mhm.
The problem is if you get flanked from the side or rear, uh, there's like not much you can actually do to that because you've got like your forces to your front. You've got to then swing around your blocks of infantry to try and fight from the rear, which takes a while. So getting encircled or hit from the rear or flanked is very bad for a ancient army.
Yeah. It's a little hard to reorganize if all you've got is some flags and a trumpet.
Yeah, and that plays into why bad weather is also extremely detrimental because if you do get flanked, it's kind of hard to actually tell the bulk of your forces that you are getting flanked.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Also, you've got to notice that if you are your average legionnaire in the middle of like a main line, just brick of Romans, it's really loud and your visibility isn't that good. You might not even notice if like a large amount of, let's say, barbarians just show up at your rear. Might not know
Hmm.
until it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. So this battle was truly like the poorest conditions you could expect for the Romans, and that really worked quite well for the Germanic tribes.
Yeah. So, anyways, here's some important things that I think we ought to discuss. The uh,
Hmm.
the Romans, right? They repeated their strategies of building forts time after time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's quite possible that again the Germans quickly picked up on that being their strategy and realized that if they attacked while they're building the fort, they would be quite disoriented. They used that to their advantage.
Yep, we talked about this, but bad terrain, just a running theme. Britain turns out not really a great place to invade.
Well, this was the Netherlands, roughly.
Sorry, the
Germany.
Netherlands.
Yeah, Germany, Netherlands, that sort of area. Yeah, lot very icky area. Though I'm sure it's lovely. No offense to anybody from there, but
Yeah,
maybe not the best place for a battle.
rain bad for military. Uh,
Yes.
this affected Roman ambitions to expand northwards quite significantly.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, as
I
any
don't think
like
they would.
military
Go ahead.
disaster, like yeah, if you have a military disaster, the Roman public will not like you.
Yeah, I'm assuming it would be terrible for anybody's political career. But yeah, if I remember correctly, they never conquered Germania, even though it's, like the Roman Empire. They were known for their ability to conquer places. They never got Germany. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
And
too
also,
disconnected.
mhm.
Yeah, too far away
Also is
from.
like to move on to the it's kind of a famous and founding part of German history. Um, this is really important because you kind of get to see the start of Germanic tribes working together as a kind of solidified unit to fight off invaders. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily the beginning of German history, but it's certainly towards the beginning and is kind of really important to a seeing where their country would go and that whole thing. Yeah. All right. So this next part is going to be a bit more analytical, and it's going to be about the systems that ran the Roman Empire. It's going to kind of probably be a bit more of just kind of throwing facts your guys' way, but do try and keep up. I'm going to start with how Roman culture and systems spread and why they spread. And yeah, you know, get ready. The Roman system of government and bureaucracy was beneficial in a way for conquered territories, as it allowed for a more efficient governance, such as like Roman cities. They brought good stuff with them. Like you could have aqueducts, you could have with that like running water, you could have a sewer system, paved roads. Like the Romans brought a lot of new technologies that helped places develop. That's not necessarily to say that conquering places and bringing a road is a good idea, but like, um, yeah. Um, with this, culture also spread really fast, like Roman culture, because it helped the people who had been conquered move up on the Roman social hierarchy ladder. So if you're some barbarian that had just been conquered by the Romans, instead of maintaining your own culture, it would be beneficial to you to adopt kind of a Roman culture, dress Roman, speak Latin, um, worship Roman gods, because that would allow you to move up in the world a lot more freely than you necessarily would be able to. So this process of Romanization was faster in the eastern part of the empire, which is like Egypt, Syria, Greece, due to them already having established systems of governance and stuff of that sort. And this is also going to play a part later on in this story. But so that western half of the empire went towards Latin and Roman culture over time, whereas the east went towards Greco culture, which again, this will be important later. Um, yeah, Jeff.
All right, now it's time to go over Roman trade and its effects.
Mm-hmm.
So the Roman Empire was uh yeah, it was the largest empire like ever up to that point, I think. Well, it was Alexander the
China,
Great.
uh,
Yeah, Alexander the Great, I think, conquered.
Alexander the Great might have
Yeah,
been, but the Roman Empire also was around during the Sing Empire, I believe it was. They were a really big empire in Europe. Definitely the
yeah, okay,
largest
well,
European empire at the time. And yeah, very big.
yeah. So, anyways, the point is that they basically controlled the whole Mediterranean. They had routes that could go into through India and stuff. Sometimes
Hmm.
um, they
Yeah.
relied heavily on the sea, except they also had a vast road network that crisscrossed the pretty much the entire empire, which was very impressive for its age. Um, Trade allowed for uh, Roman expansion of culture. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, we can kind of see like the reason that happens is you can kind of see that happening today with America. I'll use as an example. So
Hmm.
American music is listened around the world, so everyone knows that like America exists. American culture is everywhere. This also happened with the Romans. The Romans traded like everything everywhere, so people knew that Rome existed, and they were like, "Oh, cool! This is where our farming equipment comes from."
Hmm.
Uh, Trade was also necessary for the function of the state. Example of that is Egypt. Again, it has the Nile River. Uh, it's a very fertile land, so they were able to export a vast amount of food and livestock and stuff to the
Hmm.
people of Rome and beyond.
Yes. And also another thing is like the animals from Africa. I know a lot of people hear of like lions in the Colosseum and stuff, and those came due to the ability of the Romans to trade with all over. Um, Along with that, there's evidence of pottery or porcelain or whatever it is from China in Rome. So they really did have the ability to just get stuff from everywhere. Yeah.
All right. So Tyler, what'd you take
Mhm.
away from a small section on Roman trade?
Well, I'd probably say the biggest thing is that trade is like really important, and not just then, but also now. Like, you
Yes.
know, if
Trade
I take a
is
look at like, oh yeah,
very important to the expansion of a state.
not entirely what I was going for. I was more going for the fact that my phone probably has minerals that were mined in like probably Bolivia, Australia, Thailand or something, probably made in like Taiwan, and just it's probably been all over the place. Is kind of what I'm getting
Yes.
at.
Globalization. Trade
Yeah,
brings cultures together.
yeah, exactly. Um, and also like what you were going on about American culture kind of expanding like Roman culture, as in like uh, American movies, American food, American sports, like they're very well known around the world, and yeah,
Yeah, like McDonald's is in nearly every country around the world.
yeah, that's like a staple. Um,
Your staple food,
uh,
Big Mac.
yes, my healthy Big Mac. Um, oh yeah, also again, that divide I was talking about between the East and the West, that really will become quite important. I believe in the next segment. Yeah, in the next segment, that will become quite important. And like just said, Egypt is a breadbasket, and I'm not sure if it really is anymore with modern farming techniques, but historically, you will see that whoever really controls places like that, where a lot of food is produced, are able to expand a lot more. Like in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, of course, in the Indus River Valley. Like actually, China has two of these really famous rivers that allowed for incredibly fertile growing, and that really just comes to show that being able to produce a lot of food really helps a society with their ability to expand.
Yeah, more food basically means you can sustain a larger population, and
Mhm.
you can see evidence of that, like even nowadays. Like if you take a look at a map and see where people live, you'll see that there is a huge cluster of people, like around the even today, the like the Nile River.
Mhm.
Basically, China has a huge amount of people because the land there is really good for growing crops.
Same with India.
Yeah, same with India.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also with that, like the more food you have and their ability to have more people, um, you also get the ability to kind of diversify what people do. Because historically, if you don't have the ability to grow a lot of food, most people would end up working on farms. But if you're able to produce enough food, you can have people who are scholars, writers, engineers, soldiers. Like it really allows societies to develop. Yeah. Yeah, so food, really big part of human history. Who would have thought? Um,
Yes, the thing
uh,
we do 3 times a day.
yes, man, I'm actually getting kind of hungry. Whatever. We're almost done. We can get through this. Then I get to have lunch.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
what are you having
Wait,
for lunch,
having
Jeff?
for lunch. I had cereal for breakfast, and I might have cereal again.
Ooh, cereal. Nice.
Yep, we're out of pretty much everything else unless I want to have toast.
See, Jeff, this is why you're having trouble doing stuff. You don't have enough food. You're not able to diversify your lifestyle.
Ah, yes,
You
there
know,
you go. That is why I'm a failure.
yeah, you need to build a what's it, a irrigation
Strong
system in your
foundation.
backyard.
Oh yeah, that too.
Just get a little river running through it.
Uh, what are those like catapult things that Egypt used to like irrigate their farmland?
What?
You know those okay, they're kind of like systems that have like they look like trebuchets and
Oh my
they
God, that's
bring up
wild.
water from like a lower point and then they can like bring it up higher.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's pretty neat.
That just shows how much people will invent to get more food. See, man? Food. real important. Helps places develop.
Yeah, get some
All
spice going.
right. Yes. All right. Anyways, though, we are actually towards the end of our podcast. We have about one more segment, and that is to do with the fall of Rome. Um, yeah. Okay. So I'll keep this quick, but the history is quite dense and kind of boring because it takes place over a long, long period of time. Um, yeah. Good luck, everybody. As we approach the fall of Western Rome, emperors are kind of dropping like flies from assassinations. It's mostly generals who are like, hey, I should be emperor. And then they kill the emperor, and then that repeats. So,
Yeah, this is happening
yeah.
during like the third century when this is like really bad.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot of people dying, I guess would be the way. A lot of political instability. It's kind of what's important. There's also multiple civil wars that have occurred at this point. They're kind of just starting a lot, and it's mostly generals again. Um, yeah, so you can see the military playing a larger and larger role. Um, Also, with this, inflation was on the rise drastically because with all these armies out fighting, they needed to be paid bonuses, and with that, they needed to make a lot more silver coins, and that led to inflation, which kind of ruined the Roman economy. Um, and even more so, there were multiple external threats, such as the Franks, which don't mind them, the Persians, which we had talked about before, and I think it was two plagues. Yeah. So Rome is really having it rough at this point, and it's not looking good. Um, but somebody was about to turn it somewhat around. Um, and it's this guy Diocletian. And what he did was he divided up into the empire into four to make it a lot easier to manage because the empire had become very bloated. It was incredibly large and hard to run from a single place with the technology they had at that point. So this guy Diocletian was like, okay, let's divide it into four, make it easier, and that helped for a while. And what's it? Yeah, this ended when a guy named Constantine took over the rest of them. He expanded. He also he made Christianity legal, which was also a big one because for a long time it was illegal. Uh, yeah, also why Jesus is on the cross. Okay.
All right. So yeah, Constantine made quite a few changes to the Roman political structure. And for the most part, it worked for a little while. Also, Constantinople happened at around this time,
Big city.
modern day Istanbul. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, at this point, though, the Roman Empire is divided pretty much in half between the East and the West. The East is having a pretty swell time. You know, they're kind of off doing their own things in their own territory, doing trade. You know, kind of
Making bank.
yeah. They're also out of the way because it's the West that everyone kind of has their eyes set on.
Hmm.
Yeah. Uh, Basically the like Germanic Gothic tribes and stuff. They had their eyes set on the Roman Empire. The Huns were moving in from the like northern part of Europe, and they're kind of moving all the tribes down. And the easiest way for the Germanic tribes to go was kind of through Roman territory. Uh, yeah, so basically, it's not good because there are now Germanic tribes like in Roman territory. Uh, the also the Germanic tribes were used as mercenaries a lot by the Romans, but the Roman economy isn't doing too well, so they're not really getting paid anymore. So you know this is bad. And because of well, this is one of the reasons. The Visigoths, a Gothic tribe, went to Rome and just started sacking it because they weren't getting paid. Uh, and they just kind of left and got away with it. And that's a really big deal because this shows that the Roman sphere of influence is really starting to weaken if their capital
Hmm.
can just kind of be moseyed into and sacked.
Yeah, a reminder, Hannibal, like famous, incredible general, wasn't even able to do that. And
Yeah,
then these guys in 410 AD just kind of showed up and did it.
but
Yeah.
yeah, the barbarians continued advancing into the Western Empire. Uh, Territorial control began to wane as the barbarian tribes set up their own kind of enclaves or kingdoms in the former Roman Empire. Then, in 455 AD, the Vandals, another Germanic tribe, sacked Rome again. This time, really, really hard, and that's why the word vandalism is a thing.
Man, Rome is having a rough go of it, eh?
Yeah, well, at least the eastern part of the empire is doing mediocre now.
Hmm. Actually, something to remember. Um, every now and then, some people would come down to sack the Eastern Roman Empire, and the East would actually either pay them or just kind of coerce them into sacking the Western half. So, with that, you can really see that the East and the West aren't really one solidified empire anymore. Like on a map, they are, but they're really not helping each other.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, well, that's a lot of damage. Here's some more. Um, at this point, the West consists of pretty much just Italy. However, the East hasn't really changed at all. Um, well, as then this guy named Odoacer took Italy. So now there's no more Western Empire, and that was in 476. So that's what's generally considered the fall of the Roman Empire. Um, however, the East was still kicking, and it's going to be around for another millennia, and that has to do with kind of Byzantine history, which I implore you to look into further. It's very interesting, but we don't really have time to cover it in this episode, as we're already hitting about an hour and 20 minutes. Um, so even with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the legacy, the culture, and the civilization of Rome just kind of carried on. Like as we said again earlier, the culture and the language, like we can still see Latin written all over. We can still see the architectural designs everywhere. Their Roman systems of governance are still around. So how the Roman Empire did fall, it's just it how to say it continued on in spirit. Um, it didn't go out with a single bang, but a soft whimper and a long collapse from multiple stab wounds, kind of like Caesar. Okay, Jeff, that was a lot of info. Anything in particular you want to discuss from that?
well, you can see this theme even up into modern day. All empires have a shelf life.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
surprise, actually, that the Roman Empire didn't fall earlier. It was hugely overextended. Uh, like hell, probably should have disappeared when the empire shifted from, well, from when the republic shifted from a republic into an empire. That probably would have killed most like countries.
Hmm. Let alone the Mark Antony Octavian civil wars and the other civil wars and the emperor assassinations and
Yeah,
the
like it was
plagues and the Persians and
it
then the
was running on
Huns.
empty for like 200 years.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like it survived multiple plagues, multiple economy
Mhm.
collapses, uh, just like
Multiple
attrition.
civil wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did
Um,
not have a fun time. But
but yeah, it's
yeah,
you can
all
see that
empires. Mhm.
empires. Well, even when empires do fall, most of the time they kind of go out with a whimper, not a bang. Like you can go to the Ottoman Empire. Like the Ottoman Empire was dying for a long time before it finally disappeared.
Mhm.
Or the British Empire.
Yes.
Um, they I would say that they kind of went out with more of a bang than the Romans did, but you know.
Yeah,
Like
but
there was World War
in
Two.
a way. But then the empire slowly started to fall apart after World War II. So it was kind of like a bang and then a slowly falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's took a lot to bring down the Roman Empire.
Yeah. And even then, the East just kind of kept on going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's really important to understand that though we say the Roman Empire fell, it didn't really fully end until the Ottomans took over Constantinople in like 1453, was it? I want to say it's
Uh,
1453.
yeah, somewhere in like the 15th century, I think.
Yeah, you know what? A lot later, because yeah,
Damn one.
Rome started in like 700 BC, and we're talking about it falling in like 1400s. So like these guys were around for a while.
Yeah. They also had quite a few emulators, being the
Mhm.
foremost empire of like the ancient world, pretty much.
Yeah.
Italy tried to, well, Mussolini tried to pull a Rome.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah.
the Kaiser. Um,
Oh, oh
the
yeah.
Kaiser, the Czar. Yeah, yeah, you go on. Sorry.
Yeah. Like pretty much. Uh, well, not all of them, but a huge amount of like not even just European, but just world leaders who are kind of like kings or emperors from around like the time after the fall of the Roman Empire had their name like they're named after Caesar, right? Like the Kaiser of Germany, the Tsar of Russia. Um,
Those are the ones I can think of, but
yeah,
I'm
I was probably some
sure there's more.
Balkans, but who cares about the Balkans?
Yeah. um, yeah. So like Rome really influenced the world. Oh, not even to mention the Holy Roman Empire.
Oh yeah, that was a thing. That's uh, the Germanic
Germany.
tribes,
Yeah.
like their land finally got like put into a like a modern kind of state. So basically, it was like Germany all the way down to Italy, and that was a country at one point.
Yeah, and they called themselves the Holy Roman Empire. Um, there's this famous line that they were neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But yeah, they were an interesting bunch of countries, I guess. Yeah, but that really just emphasizes the point that Rome had massive influence, and a lot of countries really wanted to kind of emulate that and wanted to be the new Rome because
Yeah,
they're just such a big empire with so much respect.
yeah. Like
Um,
our language and like most languages that are like
mhm.
attributed to like birthing English, they can all kind of like trace the roots back to the Roman Empire and like Latin and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, like the I'm pretty sure like French, Spanish, Portuguese, and some other ones. Were they attributed? They might be attributed as kind of was it? It was either Romance languages or Latin, but they were like heavily influenced, like very, very much so from Latin. Yeah, and again, that's just the culture of Rome, really just seeping through to the modern day, even in the way we govern ourselves. Like, we well, maybe not in Canada, but we sort of have a republic.
Yeah, I mean, like Roman democracy definitely like inspired like our political
Mhm.
system, like even just a bit.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I think I have an American bill on me right now. If you give me a moment, I can read it. But um,
Oh yeah, E pluribus unum. That's
yeah,
Latin. It's like the motto of the presidency or whatever, out of many one, I think.
yeah. On this, there's Novus Ordo Seclorum and Annuit Septis. Um, yeah, there's like literally Latin on modern currency because it's just it's Latin,
Yeah.
recognized as such a old and respectable language. Um,
Also, their
mhm.
military victories have gone on to inspire like many modern generals. Like you'll see in like books that people like Churchill and stuff have written that will be
Mhm.
referring to like the battle, like the Punic Wars and stuff sometimes. Like just
Yeah,
like the heroes of old and the like Scorpio or Hannibal or whatever.
yeah, and their tactics are like, like a that Battle of Cannae, still looked at in school, like military schools to this day, due to its just incredible nature.
Yeah, I'm not too
Um,
sure if it's super like related nowadays. Like I don't know how you could
yeah,
use that.
modern tactics, tanks, gun. Yeah, I'm not sure how well you can do that, but an encirclement of a smaller force is still quite a feat, or of a larger
Yes.
force. Yeah. All right. Yeah, but I think at this point we've really reached the end of the episode. Um, there was a lot we covered, but I hope you were able to see some themes that can be found in history, as well as draw out some information that will be useful for you. Today we covered Rome. Uh, Tomorrow, hopefully, something else, depending on how lazy I am. But from the Punic War to the fall of Rome, we've covered a lot. Each topic is important in its own right, but together they kind of form a picture of the life of an empire. There will always be great empires, but none shall last forever, as we were talking about towards the end. Empires will fall and or will rise and see glory, but will nonetheless fall. However, there's another theme to take note of, this being the effect history has on the world we live in, such as, Roman numerals to our judicial system and even our languages. Rome's lasting impacts are undeniable. Like history builds on itself, and you can see that if you really want to look into it. Anyways, until next time, peace out. If this is going to be a YouTube video, I will post links to our sources in the description. If it's Spotify, haha, no. Um, so this has been Tyler and Jeff and Chris in the background, and we will see you later.